Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I'm finally doing my wrap up for April. For last month I read 30 books, so 30 books in 30 days, which is not that bad. It was a pretty good reading month, lots of 4 stars overall. So here is everything that I read back in April. The first book that I read was Extreme Honor by Piper J. Drake. This is romantic suspense, which is not something that I usually go into all that much. I have read and loved a couple romantic suspense books, but it's not a subgenre that I really look for, and sadly this one was okay for me. I gave it 3 stars. I mainly wanted to read this one because of the dog. The whole series centers around these military dogs. The hero, David, is an ex-soldier. He works with military dogs with rehabilitating them. He recently got a new dog named Atlas, whose handler died in combat. He was a former friend of David's, but David is having a hard time with Atlas, and that's where the heroine Lynn comes in. She is a dog whisperer, and she's the only one who seems to be able to get through to Atlas. Also, here's my dog who is trying to take a nap. So the 3 of them work together, even though David is kind of suspicious of Lynn for some reason. The whole romantic suspense part comes in with these group of bad guys going after all 3 of them. It was an okay read. I wasn't all that invested in the characters and the story or even the romance. It was just a fairly average read for me. The best part about this was definitely Atlas the dog. I don't think I'm invested enough though in this book to continue on with the rest of the series, but maybe if you like romantic suspense in general and you love dogs, this one would work a bit better for you. My next read I sadly liked even less. I gave Piece of Work by Stacey Hart 2 stars. I did not enjoy this one mainly because the hero was kind of awful. He was really arrogant, presumptuous, and just plain selfish a lot of the time. It's a work romance between a boss and an intern. Rin has just landed this prestigious internship at the Met Museum. Her boss, her female boss, is kind of awful, but then her boss's boss, our hero Court, is kind of even worse. He's hot, but a really big jerk. Court and Rin have this really intense attraction together and they do explore it, but the whole thing just wasn't really working for me. Court makes some really dumb decisions all the time regarding Rin, and with him being the boss and her being the intern, she has a lot more to lose than he does, and he just didn't really come across as caring that much about her and her role and her career. Also, he's the kind of hero where he thinks that he can't fall in love again, or he doesn't want to fall in love again because he was burned by his past. I was just not impressed with this one. It's the first book in the Red Lipstick Coalition series and the one book that I had not read yet. I really liked the other 3 books, which are about the other girls in the Red Lipstick Coalition girl group that they have going on, but Piece of Work was easily my least favorite of the series. And then of course I had to read book 3 in the Blood and Ash series, The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the latest installment in this fantasy romance series, a much awaited sequel, and I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. It's not my favorite. I think book 1 is still my favorite of the series, but still very enjoyable. I'll keep it kind of vague, though I'll probably say some slight spoilers for the first 2 books. It picks up right where book 2 left off, where we learn about Poppy's heritage. The whole book is mainly exploring Poppy and her powers, learning more about her connection to the gods, to the king of the gods. There's even more world building because there apparently is still a ton that we don't know yet. We learn more about the history between the 2 kingdoms, between the Ascended and the Atlanteans. There's dragons here, and through it all, Poppy and Cass and the romance is rock solid. We know how much they love each other, how they'll never give up on each other. They're hot and adorable here. I would say this 3rd book is the steamiest book so far. I just really like this one. It's another great installment. I know a lot of people might not be happy about even more world building, but I genuinely did enjoy learning more about this world. So it was great, and the next book that JLA is releasing is actually not book 4 in the series, but the first book in the spin-off. That series is going to be about Nikos and his consort, and I'm so excited to read it. Next, I read Black Sunshine by Karina Halley, which is Karina Halley's very first vampire romance, which I was very intrigued by. I gave this one 3, maybe 3.5 stars. Like, it was a good premise and it had a lot of potential. It just didn't quite fully meet it. The heroine Lenore thinks that she's human, but around her 21st birthday she gets kidnapped by a vampire, and that vampire tells her that she is also a vampire. Her kidnapper is our hero Solon. He is very dark and and broody and mysterious. He has his own reasons for kidnapping Lenore, which are kind of morally gray. The romance was fine. I liked Lenore and Sala, and I didn't love them, but I was intrigued by them. This book was supposed to be a standalone, but we are getting a sequel about Lenore and Solon again, which is great because there's still a lot of stuff that has to be explored. The world and the world building was a bit shallow for me. I definitely wanted more from it, but it is interesting, and again, it had a lot of potential, which is why I'm glad we're getting another book. And then I read Disgraceful by Autumn Gray, which is book 2 in the Grace trilogy. My library has been so slow in getting this trilogy. I'm still waiting on them to get book 3, but book 2 I gave 3.5 stars. I didn't love it quite as much as the first book, which I gave 4 stars to. It kind of falls into that middle book syndrome where it's kind of a lull in the story. Grace and Saul are heartbroken over breaking up. Grace is off to college. She's trying to build a new life for herself. Saul is off doing his missionary work, and they're both not over each other, so it's still pretty angsty like book 1, but it wasn't quite as interesting anymore because book 1 was Saul being tortured over wanting to become a priest and also falling in love with Grace. Here they're just kind of apart and angsty over it. There's also a slight love triangle going on with Grace off to college, and she meets Levi, who is actually a pretty nice guy, but this love triangle, it's kind of pointless because you really know who Grace is going to choose in the end. It was still a good read, just not as good as book 1. And then I had to read the new Mariana Zapata book, All Roads Lead Here. I did a little ranking video that you guys really enjoyed. I ranked all 12 MZ books out so far, so if you haven't watched it yet, I'll link it down below. All Roads Lead Here is your fairly typical MZ book. It's very slow burn, it's very long, we have a bit of an age gap. The heroine is good and fun and relatable. The hero is a grump, but this time Roads, we have our first single father hero from MZ. There's also a lot of forced proximity going on with Aurora staying in this cabin that she's renting on Rhodes's property. He is really reluctant to allow her to rent there, but she wormed her way in. She also worms her way into Rhodes's life, Rhodes and his son's life. It was just a very feel-good, sweet, solid read from MZ, so I give this one 4 stars. If you love the grumpy sunshine trope, you will definitely love Aurora and Rhodes. Next I read Duchess by Day, Mistress by Night by Stacey Reid. I give this one 4 stars. It's a great historical romance. The heroine, Georgiana, is a duchess. She's also a single mother, and Race is not titled. He's a rags to riches hero, so it's like your Clash of the Classes kind of historical romance that I love reading. The chemistry is insane between them. They start this really hot affair, and the Duchess also helps Reese by helping his sisters enter into society. I really like this one. Stacey Reid always writes steamy historical romances. I love the fact that Reese is a bit of a darker hero. He does some shady work, some underground stuff, but this is great, and I am so excited to read book 2, which has the marriage in trouble trope. And then I went on a little Nikki Sloan binge and read like 5 books from her back to back. I started with The Pool Boy, which is book 2 in her Nashville Neighborhood series. It's got another age gap, but this time instead of an older hero like book 1, it's got an older heroine. It was hot and spicy. It was exactly what I was expecting from Nikki Sloan and from the series. It's a forbidden romance where the heroine is actually the hero's mom's best friend, and Troy has also always had a crush on Erica, so this is like his fantasy come to life. There's also a music aspect to the story. Troy is a musician, he's really talented. Erica is like a manager, an agent. She kind of discovers him one night when he goes to sing at a bar, and through it all they kind of have to keep their relationship a secret. They get up to some pretty dirty stuff, and it was just exactly what I was in the mood for. And then I read Nikki Sloan's entire Filthy Rich American series. There are 4 books out so far. The first 3 books follow the same heroine, the same couple. Book 1 is The Initiation, book 2 is The Obsession, and book 3 is The Deception. It's kind of a marriage of convenience. Royce, the hero, is actually first engaged to Marist's older sister, but then the sister gets pregnant and Marist is the only one available to marry Royce, and because Marist's family is now in debt, she kind of has to follow through with this marriage. There are so many twists and turns in the series, so much manipulation from literally every single character, especially Royce's father, McAllister, who is a pretty huge character, and he becomes obsessed with Marist, creating this kind of love triangle, kind of not. I will say there were at times that I was totally on team McAllister because he was just so much more interesting than Royce most of the time. I mean, Royce wasn't a bad character and I liked him with Marist, cast. I like the two of them together, but his father is just so much more interesting, and thankfully he does get his own book in book 4, but the first 3 books, I really liked them. I gave all of them 4 stars. It was hot, it was intense, it plays around a bit with some Greek mythology. It's basically just about the very messed up lives about these filthy rich Americans. Book 4, The Redemption, easily my favorite one. I give this one 5 stars. Like I said before, it's McAllister's book, Royce's father's book, and I loved it so much. He was the perfect anti-hero. He was a villain for the first 3 books, and now he gets his own happily ever after, a very deserved happily ever after. His heroine is Sophia, who was introduced in the first 3 books. It is a humongous age gap, around 30 years. There's an office romance where she becomes his assistant, but they both are working together for this common goal. They start up this super hot affair that is just filthy. It was just the perfect read, so intense, so emotional. Sophia was the perfect heroine for him, even though I did root for McAllister in the first 3 books for Maris. Sophia was even better for him. I highly recommend you check the series out, and if you want to read The Redemption, I recommend you read the series in order just so you can see the entire character development and growth for McAllister, because it's just the best. We're also getting a 5th book kind of soon about Royce's younger brother, McAllister's other son, so we get to round out the whole Hale family. And then I read The Devil and the Deep Blue Sea by Amelia Wilde. I was so excited when I was sent this because it's a modern day pirate romance. It's the first book in a trilogy, and going into this one I didn't realize this series was also connected to 2 other series. Amelia Wilde has 3 series about 3 brothers who are named Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, and with this series about a pirate, about the sea, of course it is Poseidon. Sadly though, even though I had such high expectations for this because pirate romance, I only gave this one 3 stars. It was just okay. I didn't fall in love with the hero or heroine. There's not much really going on in this first book, just a kidnapping of the heroine. Ashley finds herself actually being kidnapped by a real life pirate. It's also a dark romance. There are quite a few things going on besides the kidnapping. There is violence and murder, dubious consent, which does sound pretty on par with a pirate romance, right? But I just was not all that interested in any of it. I wasn't a really big fan of the writing. We get a very surface level look into these characters, and at the end the heroine makes this really poor and dumb decision that leads to the hero doing something really dumb too. It's just a very unexpected dark turn at the end, and I'm not sure how either of them can move forward from that. So this one was pretty disappointing. I did actually pick up the sequel, A Deal with the Devil. I skimmed through it. I'm not really counting it as a read book, but I skimmed through it to see if anything would change. I wanted to see how they would deal with what happened at the end of book 1, and also to see if the romance would pick up, but it kind of doesn't. Poseidon doesn't really make up for what he did in book 1. There are chapters that talk about Poseidon's past that were just so freaking boring that I just ended up skimming them, and also those chapters kind of reinforced that I was missing out on 2 previous series. It made me feel like I probably should have read the first 2 series before going into this one. And it does also continue with the hero being all like, the sea is the only love of my life, I can't love you, blah blah blah. It was just not good, and I'm glad I didn't actually read it. I'm just really sad though. I had such high hopes for this modern day pirate romance, but it did not work out for me. I read an Elizabeth Hoyt book, When a Rogue Meets His Match, which is book 2 in the Grey Court series. I gave this one 4 stars. It was great. I love the romance here. It's enemies to lovers, but more like hate to love on the heroine side. The hero, Gideon, has spent the past 10 years doing a duke's dirty work. Now he's ready to get out from under the duke's thumb, but he does have one last task, and once he completes that task, he'll get something that he really wants, which is the duke's niece's hand in marriage. I love the romance here, though I will say the pacing could have been a bit better. Everything is just rushed at the end, but I just love the fact that Gideon was obsessed with Messalina since forever, and now he has the one thing that he really wants in his life, which is Messalina, almost in his hands, but he just kind of has to kill her brother to get it. So Gideon is torn between Messalina, killing her brother, and being able to get out from the Duke's thumb, all the while Gideon is trying to make his new wife fall in love with him to turn her hatred into a genuine love. Like book 1, there is a lot going on. It does verge into into some romantic suspense, and the ending kind of wraps up a bit too neatly and quickly for me, but I still really enjoyed this one. I give it 4 stars. I really liked Gideon and Miss Lena's characters, and I would have loved if the book focused more on them rather than everything else going on. They were really what held my attention because I was so invested in them, in their romance. But if you have read Elizabeth Hoyt in the past, you'll probably know that there's always a bunch of stuff going on outside of the romance, so this is pretty on par with that. Next, I read Falling for Her by Monica Murphy, which is book 2 in the Callahan series, which is her high school, mature, young adult, new adult series. I don't really read books in high school anymore. It's not my thing, but I decided to give the series a try. Sadly, I haven't really loved the series just yet. I gave book 1 3 stars. Book 2 was also another 3 stars. It's your fairly typical high school romance. We've got a popular jock hero. Jake is the quarterback on their football team. Hannah is a not so popular girl. She's quiet, she's artsy, keeps to herself. Jake sees Hannah one day and he's just so intrigued and he can't stop thinking about her. She doesn't really like him just because he is, your typical jock, but then they start talking to each other, texting each other a lot, getting to know each other, and falling for each other. The romance is pretty cute, enjoyable, if cliched, but it was just the whole teenage drama and angst thing I was not into. There's drama with Jake's football team, with homecoming stuff, with the different social crowds at high school, like popular and non-popular groups. It was all drama I could not get into and just could not bring myself to care about. It was an okay read. It had its ups and downs, so 3 stars. And I'm not sure why, but I continued reading the series. I read book 3 in the Callahan series. Addicted to Him is Ava and Eli's book. We figured out that there was something kind of going on between them in book 2, and now we finally get their romance in book 3. It's a bit of a forbidden romance. Ava is the youngest of the Callahan siblings. Eli is a quarterback at their biggest rival school, so Eli and Jake, Ava's older brother, are just enemies. So the forbidden romance is there between the rival schools and Eli and Jake hating each other. There's a ton of drama with Eli just inciting Jake, creating all these videos talking shit about him and about Ava. They're doing this all on Snapchat, which is unfortunately already very dated now. I'm giving this one 2.5 stars because this is definitely my least favorite of the series so far. I did not like Eli. I just did not get this guy. I mean, yes, he's a damaged guy. He's got a tortured past, but he's just pretty awful to Ava and everyone else. What's interesting though is that their romance is not finished with this 3rd book. They get a sequel with book 4. I haven't read it yet, not sure I will, but there's still a lot to make up for and to deal with, so I can kind of understand why they get 2 books instead of 1. I will say though, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the series, if you like high school drama, this series will be perfect for you. It is literally just endless high school drama. I then read Kiss My Cupcake by Helena Hunting, which is an enemies to lovers contemporary romance. I was really excited about this one because it had a very interesting setup. Blair, the heroine, has just opened up a cocktails and cupcakes shop, but exactly on the same day that she opens up her shop, the sports bar next door, owned by Ronan, our hero, also opens up. There's a bit of miscommunication that sours things between them and makes them rivals. They get into some ridiculous shenanigans, situations that cause them to try to one-up each other constantly. I sadly didn't love this one, even though I was initially really excited and invested. The beginning was definitely my favorite part about this book, but the rest of the story kind of flattened out for me. The buildup of the romance was only okay. I liked it in the beginning, but then I just got a bit bored by the middle. I will say though, I love the whole idea of this shop that sells cupcakes and cocktails. I don't know if it's actually a thing in real life already, but I need it to be. So overall, it was just a 3-star read for me. Next, I read My Best Friend's Sister by QB Tyler. I give some 3.5 stars. It's a quick, short, and steamy read. It's only about 100 pages, so a novella. It's told solely from the hero's point of view, and he's kind of a dick, especially how he views women. It's kind of awkward to read. But Jackson falls for his best friend's younger sister, Ava, who is also living in New York. She asks him for help one day, and they kind of reunite from that. He is shocked that she's turned into such a gorgeous woman. He tries to stay away because of the whole typical best friend sister thing, but it's a bit hard for him. I would say if you're in the mood for something really short, hot, kind of cheesy, this one would be one to try. I read a couple more smutty novellas, and of course I had to read Jessica Kane. Bulky by Jessica Kane I gave 3 stars. It's your typical over-the-top Jessica Kane novella. Huge age gap, she falls for her best friend's dad. And then Bossed Around I gave 3.5, maybe 4 stars, and it's mainly because we get a slightly dominant heroine here. If you read Jessica Kane, you know the heroes are always insanely dominant and possessive and obsessive, and while the hero is that in this novella, the heroine here is also a bit dominant herself. She likes to tell him what to do. So that one was very interesting and different to read. The other novella that I read, well, this one is more like a short story. It's literally only 15 pages, but I read Headless by Avita Weiss. This short story is an erotic, polyamorous retelling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman. So already I was like, yes, I need to read it, but it's a bit too short for me. It was only 15 pages and the smut wasn't actually all that smutty. So I give it 3.5 stars. I still really like the writing and the whole spooky gothic vibes. I think the author is planning to write more and an actual like full-length novella or maybe even novel about these 3 characters, this polyamorous couple. I'm really excited if she actually does it because I really wanted more from it. And then I randomly decided to go back to some chick lit with Susan Elizabeth Phillips, Heaven, Texas. This is book 2 in her Chicago Star series, her sports chick lit romance series, and I give it 3.5 stars. It was enjoyable, but it does read pretty dated. It was published back in 1995. We have a man-whore player hero who is an ex-football player. Bobby is retired, he's sleeping with beautiful women and just living his good life. Unfortunately, he has a contract that he signed out for that he's not going through with. So Gracie, the heroine who works for the film company that Bobby is working with, she's forced to take Bobby Tom to the filming set no matter what. Doesn't matter that Bobby Tom doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to go with her, doesn't matter if he's super rude to Gracie because she's not like a gorgeous model woman that he always hangs out with. So he makes her life a living hell all the way back to Texas. The romance, I will say, was pretty cute. We have a playboy gorgeous hero, a prim proper wallflower heroine, total opposites, but the hero just can't stop thinking about her. The heroine tries to resist him. Of course, she's like a 30-year-old virgin, but even though it's not the most unique kind of setup, I did really enjoy the romance. Bobby messes up at the end and there's a bit of groveling going on, which I always appreciate. It was just a very fun book, but you can definitely tell it was written quite a while ago. And then I read the first 2 books in the If Love series by Anna Huang. This one is actually a duet because the first 2 books in this 4-book series is about one couple. It's a second chance romance, so book 1 is about the first time that these characters fall in love, and then the second book is about their reunion and them falling back in love a second time around. If We Ever Meet Again is book 1. Blake and Farah meet at this foreign exchange school college in Shanghai. They're both from the US studying abroad, and they have this really sweet and heartfelt college romance here. They have this 1 year together. They're exploring Shanghai and China. They're both growing into themselves, trying to find out what they want to do in their careers and the rest of their lives. But it is a duet, and we know that it's a second chance romance, so the ending is them being torn apart. And I will say, after having read both books, I'll just throw it out there that Blake never cheats on Farah. I'll just keep it at that. But I did like these 2. I like their characters. The writing was good. They're a bit dorky, very adorable. I just had a lot of fun reading their first romance. So I give this one 3.5 to 4 stars. Book 2 though, I enjoyed a lot. I gave it 4 stars. If the Sun Never Sets is set 5 years after the ending of book 1. They reunite when Blake hires Farah as his freelance interior designer. Farah has actually just been fired from her interior designing job, so she's trying out this solo thing for the first time. Blake is really successful now, running a bunch of sports bars, and he has never been able to get over Farah, the one love of his life. So this book was mainly just Blake groveling and trying to win back Farah, trying to get her to trust him again, make her fall back in love with him, which means this book was perfect for me. I love a good groveling romance, though I will say Blake does make some dumb decisions again. It's a great conclusion to their second chance romance. romance. Weirdly, you can probably read it as a standalone. It reads like a pretty regular second chance romance, and it does give enough good background about what happened in book 1. Still though, I would recommend reading book 1 just because it's really cute. We do get the happily ever after at the end, and the next 2 books are actually about their friends. There's a good friend group here, and I'm really excited to continue reading it. And then I read my book club Ravished by Romance April book club read, The Heiress Gets a Duke. This one is a new Gilded Age historical romance series from Harper St. George. I liked it. I gave it 3.5 stars. It had a very promising start. I loved the meet cute here so much. August is an American heiress. She goes with her friend to a fighting match. That's where she meets our Duke hero Evan, except she has no idea that he's a Duke because he's the one fighting in the ring. He ends up asking her for a kiss there, which she does give him, and that's how these two first meet. Sadly though, the rest of the book doesn't really have that much about the fighting anymore. It's about Evan needing to marry an heiress because his family has no money anymore. He agrees to marry a Crenshaw sister, and he thought that the girl that he kissed was the sister that he was going to marry, but it turns out that is August's younger sister Violet, and August, being a loving older sister, she'll do everything she can to prevent this marriage because she doesn't want her sister to enter a loveless marriage. This one was fun, but like I said earlier, the beginning was definitely the best part about this book. August does fall for the Duke, but she doesn't want to marry because that means losing her position at her family's company. The middle does drag, which is why I had a hard time fully loving this book, but it's not a bad start to the series, and I'm very excited for book 2 because it's about Violet, the younger sister, and this Duke's cold, mysterious friend. Next, I decided to read an alien romance, a sci-fi romance, so I read Strange Love by Anne Aguirre. It's the first book in a series, and it was surprisingly really sweet and adorable. We have an alien hero who actually does look like an alien and not humanoid. He's just trying to find his mate. Beryl, the heroine, is accidentally abducted along with her dog by Xyler, our alien hero. Beryl doesn't actually get too messed up over this. She kind of goes with the flow, but again, there's nothing she can really do about it anyway. And I guess it does help that she has her dog Snaps, who is so freaking cute. Luckily, there's a translator at the beginning of the book, so there's no language barrier here. The dog even gets a translator, so we get a talking dog in this book. Xyler is a total sweetheart of a hero. He's a sweetheart alien. They get into this whole competition thing where they have to prove to each other and to the rest of their sci-fi world that they are meant to be mates. The world building was good. It wasn't too over the top or info dumpy. It was just a very sweet alien romance, so I really liked it, and I gave it 4 stars. And again, there's a talking dog, so how could I not enjoy this? Next, I read Twice Shy by Sarah Hogel, which I gave a surprising 4 stars to. I wasn't a big fan of this author's debut book, You Deserve Each Other, so I went into this one a bit weary, but I ended up enjoying it. It was a very wholesome and pure romance, a very good sunshine grump trope. The main characters are adorable. Maybelle loves to daydream. Wesley is a total shy grump. These two meet when they discover that they're sharing an inherited estate. Maybelle's great aunt passed, and she's left both of them this completely run down and messy estate. There is a ton of crap in there as well because the great aunt could not stop shopping. So the whole book is Wesley and Maybelle fixing up this estate, slowly feeling each other out and then falling for each other. It's just a very wholesome romance with pretty low drama. I really like this one, even though I will say that there's not much for the character development. That doesn't really happen until the very end of this book. Still, if you want something lighthearted and very feel good, Twice Shy is perfect. I then read Thicker Than Water by Dylan Allen. I have this special hardcover edition from Bell Box. I really enjoyed this one. I give it 4 stars. We have a heroine who is a famous author. Lucia has written this best-selling book, and Reese, the hero who works in Hollywood, he wants to adapt that book. They get off to a pretty rough start in the beginning, but once the adaptation gets rolling, that's when these two are forced together even more. Lucia ends up staying at Reese's very big house, so there's lots of forced proximity there, but their romance is not easy and smooth sailing from there because Lucia is actually an illegal immigrant. Lucia entered the US as a minor, so she's is a dreamer, and the book talks a lot about immigration and policies and the Dream Act. So it gets pretty intense and emotional, and I was really intrigued seeing a romance book try to tackle this issue that I don't see a lot in romance books. It is an interesting and different kind of story, and yes, it is a bit sensationalized with a famous best-selling author heroine and this rich billionaire hero, but I did really enjoy it overall. The second to last book that I read in April was The Duke Heist by Erica Ridley. I've heard a lot of good things about this one, and I was so excited because there's a heist in here. The heroine Chloe and her orphan siblings try to steal back a missing painting. She's able to do the heist and get the painting, but on her way back home, it turns out that along with the painting, she stole a duke. Our Duke hero Lawrence is in a lot of debt, which means he needs to marry someone rich, and that someone is sadly not Chloe, at least as far as Lawrence thinks. Regarding the stolen painting, Chloe didn't actually get the right one, so she needs to cozy up with Lawrence in order to physically get close to the painting in order to steal it back. They get close to each other, but they sadly can't actually be together, and this little angst does make things a bit slow and dragged out. I like these two though, and I really liked Chloe's siblings, but I was never that invested in their romance. I was mainly here for the heist, which I did like. Still, it's an enjoyable read, which is why I gave it 4 stars. And the final book that I read back in April was another Anna Huang book, Twisted Love. This is the first book in her Twisted series. It's new adult, college, falling for your brother's best friend. There's also some romantic suspense as well. Alex, our hero, is driven by revenge. He wants revenge on the people who killed his family. In the meantime, Alex has been asked by his best friend to look after that best friend's little sister, Ava. These two become temporary neighbors, and that's when things get very, very interesting. Alex is an asshole hero. He is a total jerk to everyone. He's very cold in the inside. I mean, his family was literally murdered, but Ava is the only one who seems to be able to melt him. She has her own tortured past, but she does try to live life to the fullest. The romance was great. These two just can't stop thinking about each other, and Alex becomes all growly and alpha and possessive. The romance was just a lot of fun, very steamy, lots of dirty talk from Alex. It was more the suspenseful part that I wasn't completely sold on. There's a thing that happens with Ava and her past that kind of comes out of left field. I was intrigued by Alex and his whole plan for revenge though. That part was interesting. But yeah, overall, I really like this one. It was a great first book in the series. I give it 4 stars, and I'm so excited for more from the series because there's this girl group, Ava and her friends. They're really great together, and each of them get their own books. So this one is your not so typical college new adult romance with a whole suspense plot. It gets actiony and a little dark. There's some good grovel at the end, and if you love a grumpy sunshine kind of romance, definitely read Twisted Love. So those were all the books that I read last month. Let me know your thoughts if you've read any of them. Links to everything will be down in the description below. Also, if you're interested in this dark romance shirt, it's from Hello Lovely Box. You can use my code Lacey15 for 15% off. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!